Today we're going to talk about 10 tips on how to focus while reading boring materials. Now, I absolutely love reading, and reading should usually be an enjoyable experience. But sometimes you might have to read something that's a bit boring. Maybe it's a textbook from a class that doesn't interest you, or maybe it's a legal contract that is just pages and pages of dry information. But we live in a time where it's becoming increasingly important to be able to get through new information quickly and remember it, regardless of how interesting it may or may not be. Some students and professionals spend 4 to 7 hours each day reading. In fact, billionaire Warren Buffett, one of the most successful investors of all time, estimates that he spends about 80% of his workday reading and thinking. He says that that's how knowledge works. It builds up like compound interest. But during your quest for knowledge, you will inevitably have to deal with some boring materials. It's harder to concentrate on these kind of materials, and that results in a slower reading speed, poor comprehension, and also minimal retention. Here are 10 strategies you can implement immediately to help you stay focused while reading for long periods of time, even if that material is boring. Tip number 1, try and make it interesting. Sometimes the information we read is not presented in a way that's aligned with our personal interests and learning styles, or maybe the writer is just plain boring. One strategy I like to implement is checking to see if someone has already presented this information on YouTube in a lecture, an animation, or a documentary format. Also, doing a quick Google search can get you access to the same information presented by different authors or bloggers. So let's say you're studying a topic in history, and that topic just isn't that interesting to you. You can head over to YouTube, type in that exact topic, and usually within the first 5 results, you'll find a video that might present that information in a more interesting manner. There are actually a number of YouTube channels that are totally dedicated to presenting history in an interesting manner. I'll add the links below in the description, right below this video. So once you've watched an interesting video on the topic, you'll find that reading the boring stuff will be a lot easier, and you should be able to get through the information much more quickly. You might even change your mind and realize this is not as boring as I thought. Tip number 2, ask yourself, why am I reading this? Are you preparing for a test? Are you reading it for work? What is the exact purpose and expected outcome from reading this material? Do you need to answer specific questions or solve a problem? Questions help focus the mind. By asking yourself questions before you start reading, you are basically preparing your brain for a more efficient intake of the information. You'll unconsciously tune into the information, the relevant information, and you'll skim over the less relevant info. Not all information that we read will be useful for our specific purpose. Sometimes, when you get caught up in the details, you lose sight of the big picture. By focusing on your objectives, you'll concentrate on the outcome rather than the daunting task of reading boring material. Tip number 3, inspect before reading. This means just getting familiar with your material before you start reading it. Pay attention to the structure of the text. Are there any bullet points, headings, lists, or other recurring patterns in the material you're going to read? Information is usually presented in these ways because the author wants to place special emphasis on main ideas or important details. By identifying these patterns, you can calibrate your brain to encode the information much more efficiently. Let's say you're reading a chapter in a textbook that is 40 plus pages. You start reading the introduction, then you flip through and only read the headings, subheadings, boldface words. When you get to the end, you read the conclusion. If there are questions for homework, maybe you read those questions, even if you can't answer them right now. Now you have a good idea of what the chapter is generally about. You've inspected the material. Now, if you start reading this chapter in its entirety, you'll find it much easier to process the information. You'll probably go a little faster, you'll comprehend it better, even if it's boring material. Tip number 4, use a visual cue to guide your eyes. Your eyes are naturally attracted to motion. So by using your hand, your finger, or a pen, or even your mouse to guide your eyes while you're reading, you force yourself to focus on the material. Using a visual cue to guide your eyes will also help you read a bit faster because you'll be better focused. Tip number 5, read and recall method. Most readers spend about 20 to 30% of the time rereading, and sometimes more if it's boring material. This ever happen to you? You read a whole page of text, and then you look up wondering, what in the world did I just read? We can combat this problem by performing a little trick. After you read a paragraph of text, stop and take a quick note of what you just read. Just simply write down a word, a phrase, or a quick sentence on anything that caught your attention. And then you repeat this process after each paragraph. Or if going paragraph by paragraph is too redundant, force yourself to take a note after each page or after each section. This is the read and recall method. You read something and immediately try to recall it through short, concise notes. The idea here is that when you know you have to write something down, you're much more likely to hold yourself accountable and pay attention while reading. Tip number 6, take breaks. It's very important to keep the natural rhythm of your brain in mind while reading. Most of us can only remain focused on a task for about 25 minutes. For some of us, that time frame is much lower. For some of us, that time frame might be a lot higher. It's important to know what is the breaking point for your focus. Staying focused requires your brain to work hard. We use mental processes to help us stay focused. Think of these mental processes like little focus muscles. Just like you wouldn't exercise at a high intensity for a very long period of time without taking some breaks, you should not try to read for extremely long periods of time without taking some short breaks. So you might try to focus for 25 minutes and then take a 5-minute break. This is sometimes referred to as the Pomodoro technique. Your break can be getting up to stretch your legs, walking around, checking your phone, or if you want the break to further your studies or be more productive, you might review your notes during that break, or create your notes if you haven't already. And then repeat the process, 25 minutes of focused reading, 5 minutes of a break. If you feel like you can focus for a longer period of time, you might try 50 minutes of reading and then 10 minutes of break time. Taking these breaks will improve your mental agility. Tip number 7, review what you read. Reading boring material is a flavorless experience. It's like eating food with no seasoning. While we can do it, it does not particularly stimulate us. When it comes to the core purpose of why we read, which is to comprehend and retain information, our brain needs seasoning to help us read it well. You can basically spice up your reading by reviewing your material in creative ways. You might try reading your notes out loud, or if you're somewhat musical, you might sing them. You might draw images, or you might create a mind map. The more we engage different parts of our brain, the more easily we're able to make the boring reading material come alive. Tip number 8, create rewards. Most people are motivated by rewards. Just like a puppy dog who does little tricks for a treat, we are not much different than our furry friends in that we are motivated by rewards. Set some rewards before you start reading. It doesn't have to be anything spectacular. The reward for finishing a section of text or an entire chapter could be a cup of coffee or a quick snack. Games do this very, very well. What is the point of getting points in a game? In most games, you can't really use these points for anything real. But the fact that a game has points motivates us to play, makes us more competitive. And that leads us to our next topic. Tip number 9, turn reading into a game. How fast can you read a single page of text while still maintaining a high level of comprehension? Why not time yourself and try to beat your record 1 page at a time? So let's say it takes you 1 minute and 10 seconds to read a single page of text, 1 minute and 10 seconds. Well, now you can turn this into a game and try to beat that time. The next time around, you might read a page in 1 minute and 5 seconds. Then you're going to try and shoot for a minute. Gamifying the reading experience can help you focus and make reading much more engaging. Remember what it was like to be a kid? Everything was a game. Remember how long you used to stay focused on playing with a toy or a game that you found interesting? When we grew up, we kind of forgot that we can essentially turn almost anything into a game. Games motivate us and engage parts of the brain tied to our need for entertainment and challenge and competition. By creating little games with our reading material, we can basically trick our brain into thinking we're playing a game, and all of a sudden, that boring material will be much more engaging. Tip number 10, find a study buddy. Sometimes hearing another perspective from a classmate or a friend can make a dull topic come to life. Find someone you can read or study with who is creative and positive. This should be someone who not only motivates you to get through your reading material, but also holds you accountable. They should be able to bring about interesting conversations, theories, and facts, which will result in a greater level of comprehension and enjoyment. If you try some or all of the suggestions in this video, I think you'll find yourself better able to read through those quote-unquote boring materials. Do you have any tricks that help you pay attention while reading? Go ahead and post a comment below and let us know. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for weekly videos. I'm Paul Nowak, and thanks for watching.